All right. And so it is 1 p.m. Eastern, which means it's about lunchtime in Texas, and it's also time to begin. So first and foremost, I appreciate everybody taking the time out of their day to join us for the webinar. Once again, my name is John Parrell, and I'll be taking us through the topic, which is managing onboarding for low-touch customers. We got a lot of good things to discuss today. We got some poll questions, we got some graphs, and maybe a joke or two. We'll see. But just a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. I'm joined by my colleague. Her name is Bianca. She will be monitoring the questions as they're coming in. I already see some questions that are coming in, so it's great. So feel free to ask some questions. I'll save some time at the end of this to do my best to answer some of the questions. If for some reason we're unable to get to answer all the questions, no matter what, we'll follow up with an email answering all the questions as well as a recording of this presentation. So let's go ahead and get started. We got a lot of good things to cover today. So like I said, my name is John Parrell. There's a picture of me, really pre-pandemic and probably, almost 10 pounds lighter than I am now. But in terms of the topic and the conversation today, it's all about low-touch onboarding. And the points that I really want to make is using data to empower your customers to be more self-sufficient, defining the activation versus the aha moment for your customers, and how to keep the excitement high for those low-touch customers. And so before we get too deep into it, just to share, probably I'm sure everybody's aware of this, right? What is the coverage model, or just a couple of examples of coverage models, right? This is the kind of pyramid of the example, but the idea is at the top of this pyramid is the high touch segment. And generally speaking, it's one CSM that is managing a small handful of accounts. And at the bottom of it is a low touch segment, which is where we're going to be focusing the majority of our time today. And I always find it interesting. You have the privilege to speak to probably around 70 different companies a month. And it's interesting that they always refer to the customer success role differently. The majority of the time it's referred to as customer success managers, but I also hear client success managers, account managers, customer advocates, strategic account managers, customer marketers even. And thankfully, I rarely ever hear it referred to as customer support. But although the nomenclature might be different and the KPIs might be a little different, the definition for this is always the same. It's these people are in charge of driving the customers to their desired outcomes. And so then when we start to discuss the engagement strategies, it's interesting because high touch, it's always referred to as high touch. I rarely hear it being called something differently. But at the bottom of the pyramid, low touch, I hear all different types of names for this segment. Low touch, tech touch, digital touch, digital engagement, digital adoption. And even one of my favorites was the opportunity segment. But just like the CSM role, right, the low touch segment, it might be referred to differently. The definition is always the same. It's that one person managing a lot of accounts. And so once again, that's the segment that we're going to be focused on today, is how can we help that one person manage all of those accounts specifically during the onboarding process. And when I've seen this done right, it's a really powerful and proactive way to manage a whole lot of customers. But unfortunately, when I've seen it done poorly, it just becomes reactive customer support. It's somebody just playing firefighter, responding to tickets as they're coming up. So now that we kind of defined the segment that we're going to be focused on today, what I'd like to understand is just to get a sense of the people on the line, what percentages of customers would you consider that would fall into your low touch segment? So across your entire company base, right, what percentage of your customers would fall into what you would consider your low touch segment? So we'll give a couple of minutes here for people to answer, but it's 0 to 25%, 26 to 50%, 51 to 75%, or 76 and up. And so let's see some of the results. Well, it looks like it's pretty even in terms of the middle, which is kind of what I expected, right? And really what that means is that, with this and really customer success in general, it's never a one size fits all. If you have a mixture type of business, which it seems like a lot of people do, some low touch and some non-low touch, you're going to have different workflows for those different segments of customers. And of course, I understand, right? Obviously, low touch, what factors in what makes up a low touch customer could be a variety of different factors, from the price that they're paying you, the complexity of your product, or even the resources that you have available. The first two, not much we can do to impact that, but obviously the last one, the resources available, there's definitely some things that we could benefit there. And I'm not going to harp too much on this, but I'm sure people have seen this type of graph before, right? It's the retention over time, and especially for low touch, you can see that the retention is significantly impacted within those first 90 or first few months of the customers with you, right? It's a huge drastic impact. Then from there, it starts to level out. And unfortunately, generally speaking, when it comes to low touch onboarding, it's oftentimes just driven by marketing style emails, right? I'm sure we've all downloaded software before where we get that welcome email, and then 3 days later, we get another email telling us to do something that may or may not be relevant to us. And then a few days later, right, you get another email telling you to do step 4 and step 5, but you still haven't even completed step 2 yet. And generally speaking, the problem with these is that they're all time-based triggers, right? And when it comes to onboarding, it needs to be more focused on outcomes and actions. And so the first thing that I really want to make clear here is that when it comes to low-touch onboarding strategies, it has to be data-driven. It's all about automation with this segment, right? What can we automate? How can we do more with less? And automation is almost useless if there's no data helping drive the automation. And if you were managing 2 customers, you could spend a lot of time, calling each of those 2 customers, every individual user, spending time org charting that business or doing daily business reviews with them if you really wanted to. But if you start to manage 50 accounts, 100 accounts, 1,000 accounts, there's just no feasible way for you to really have a good understanding of each individual account unless you have this data readily available to you. And the data also answers really the more important or the most common question that I get, which is, well, how do we find that perfect balance? Low touch, obviously it's all about automation, but how do we prevent it from being too automated? And it's really 2 ends of the spectrum here, right? One end of the spectrum is that the customer, they're paying you and they demand success, right? They demand authentic one-to-one, human service, human-oriented level of engagement. But you as a business, you need to find something that's more repeatable, reportable, and scalable. So finding that perfect balance can be a challenge because on one end of the spectrum, right, you're either just shooting spam out of a cannon, being insincere with your messages, being ineffective or inefficient with your messages. And then the other end, you're going for that precision rifle shot. And when you have 90 other customers with you, you can't take all that time to set up that one individual email. So data really is the solution to this, right? We can use the data to create 2 different things. One is the persona of the customer, defining the role of that user, defining the size of the company that they work for, defining their desired outcomes, and then supplement that with usage data. So now that we know who they are and their goals, now we can understand, well, are they doing the right things to get them to those overall goals? And together, this is what's going to allow the automation to feel much more targeted and timely. To say things like, hey, admin user with the goal of X, Y, and Z and low product adoption, you should be receiving this email. Or even things around, hey, new user that purchased 1 license, maybe your business has the opportunity to have 100 licenses, you should be receiving this email versus, hey, new user that bought 1 license and you'll only be able to buy 1 license, right? You should be receiving just this email. And speaking of emails, I'm sure if I started the poll with how many people use a welcome email, it would probably be darn near 100%. Almost everybody uses welcome emails, and as you should. But if everybody's doing it, the question really back is, well, how do we differentiate ourselves? How do we make this useful to the customers? It's just very, very generic and just everybody receives the same exact email, or can we use that persona data to use it to create more useful emails to those specific customers? And I'm sure we've all downloaded software where we get the welcome email and that's the only touch point we'll ever receive. And if that is the case, it's a great time to enable your customers to be self-sufficient. Have that welcome email contain the resources available for your customers, right? Provide them links to online training videos. If you do public training sessions, right, the calendar, when are those going to be upcoming? If you use an LMS system, if you use customer communities, as well as success plans. And I know oftentimes success plans is thought of as just something for the high touch segment. The reality is it works great for the low touch segment as well. It's giving them that clear path to success, right? What are the things that they need to be doing to find success? It doesn't have to be super detailed, but allow them to see, what do I need to do to be successful with this system? And kind of once again, right, the segment, it's all about automation. It's all about empowering your customers to be self-sufficient. And I know sometimes when it comes to automation, it's almost a dirty word for customer success. But, kind of the reality here is that a lot of these customers, they expect something to be more DIY, right? They don't want to oftentimes have to rely on waiting to schedule a kickoff call. They would rather have some tools where they can get started now. And speaking about kind of getting started now, right, the welcome emails, it shouldn't be a linear path. It shouldn't be, you do this, now you're going to receive this next email no matter what, right? If your customer is accelerating through the onboarding process and already completed steps 5 and step 6, don't send them an email about step 2, right? Keep pushing them through the process. And just to highlight even one of our own customers who's done this really, really well, our customer named Untapped. Some of you might be familiar with them. If you're a beer drinker, you might even have their app downloaded on your phone. But their actual customers are restaurants and breweries. And what they do is they provide a way for these restaurants and breweries to advertise their beer menus, so us, the consumers, are aware of, okay, which beers are on tap at these restaurants. But with Untapped, they have both a low touch segment and a high touch segment of customer. And prior to ChurnZero, both of those segments of customers required very hands-on onboarding. It required that new customer, that new restaurant manager, to schedule a kickoff call with the Untapped CSM. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, a restaurant manager, they're very busy running around managing the restaurant. And at the same time, the Untapped CSM, they're supporting both high touch and low touch customers. So all those new low touch customers that were signing up and needing to do a kickoff call, it was pulling them away from their time with those high dollar customers of theirs. So using ChurnZero for the low touch segment, they set up a great welcome email, which provided links to in-app tutorials to encourage those customers to create their first menu inside of Untapped, totally hands-off from the CS perspective. So when that new user logged in, they were already greeted by the tutorials to walk them through the 4 or 5 different steps that they needed to do. Once again, totally hands-off. And within 24 hours, if that new user hasn't created their first menu yet, it sent them an automated email with the link to the CSM's calendar. This way, if they still needed access to a CSM, they had access in a timely manner. But what they actually found was that just through the email and just through the in-app tutorials, they found an 80% completion rate in terms of new users creating their first menu within 24 hours. And what does that really mean? It means that 80% less customers are needing to schedule 30-minute or an hour-long kickoff call since they're doing it on their own. And speaking about Untapped, speaking about getting their customers to create that first menu, for Untapped, that was their aha moment, was creating the first menu inside of Untapped. That really brings up the next point here, which is there's a difference between activation and the aha moment for your customers. For Untapped, it wasn't just getting them to download Untapped or registering with Untapped, it was actually creating that first menu. And the aha moment is often when the value of your product becomes clear to your customers. The aha moment might not be the same for all of your customers. We talked about personas earlier and the goal of each maybe individual persona, but the aha moment can be different depending on the type of user that they are. But when it comes to onboarding, obviously time to value is an incredibly key metric for companies. But if you don't know what that value point is, then it's really tough to track that metric. And so on the right-hand side of the screen, you just see a couple of example tech companies and their aha moment. And the one I like to use as the example is Slack, right? They're not just trying to get companies to enroll or download Slack or have all the users look at Slack or download the application, but they're actually needing those users to send 2,000 messages. They know that if they send 2,000 messages, they're going to be a long-term Slack customer. And so what they do is they keep encouraging customers to send more messages until they hit that threshold. That is their aha moment. And kind of like the earlier slides, right? Slack wouldn't know that unless they had the data to support them. So data becomes very, very important, especially when it's defining your aha moments. And just like you have your aha moments, you're also going to have your oh no moments. And these are more things that you can automate within your onboarding process. The oh no moments are the common pitfalls your new customers are falling into, right? Where do they typically get caught up in the process? Where are they typically opening up support tickets? What support tickets do you see within your first 7 days or first 30 days of a new customer? So just like you have your aha moments, have your oh no moments, and have some automation that can be triggered to immediately remedy or resolve these oh no moments. And just to give an example, right, even us, ChurnZero, ourselves, we have a lot of reporting that's built in. And we used to get a lot of support tickets asking to change one of the columns of our reports. And the reality was there was already a button to do exactly that. And so we looked at, hey, we're getting a lot of support tickets for this. So we just created an in-app message to notify any new user who hasn't clicked on that button within being live for 14 days, just to make them aware of it. Now, we probably see that ticket maybe once a month. And when it comes to your oh no moments, right, some of the tips to help you identify these, look at support tickets. Also, speak to your customers, speak to your churn customers. You can learn a lot and identify trends from speaking to your customers about, hey, what was your experience during onboarding, right? What were the typical hurdles that you had? And we're talking about onboarding here, but just to take a step back, depending on your company, obviously, but more than likely, your new customer, they spent a lot of time, they spent a lot of resources evaluating your technology, getting it approved internally, sticking their neck on the line. And now when they begin the onboarding process, how do we keep the excitement high? How do we keep the momentum going? So we talked about the welcome email. It can be really powerful, but at the same time, one of the things to think about is don't overwhelm them with too many different tasks, too many different links to videos, too many different tutorials, because it can end up paralyzing them. Through the success plan, we can share with them what they need to be worried about today and start to onboard them more at a comfortable pace. The success plan, though, is also a great way to keep that excitement high. People love to see their progress. People love to take a look back and see at what they accomplished. There's a reason why those kind of before and after fitness photos are so powerful, right? Look what I look like a year ago. Look what I look like today. As well as the kind of joke about creating a to-do list. It's what is your first item that you put on a to-do list? Well, the first item is to create a to-do list. Why? So that way you can instantly check it off, feel that sense of accomplishment, and get the momentum rolling, get the ball rolling. It's the same thing with these as well, right? Give your customers quick wins and allow them to see their status, right? Allow them to see that progress parts, gamifying the experience for them. And speaking of those achievements, speaking about those quick wins, celebrate it with the customer. Use positive reinforcement to keep the excitement high, right? Did they invite their first user? Did they send their first 100 Slack messages? Did they publish their first menu inside of Untapped? Whatever it is, let them know that they're already off to a great start. It's also a good time to not just congratulate the user, but start to involve maybe executive sponsors or people that aren't necessarily daily users of your technology. Let them know that the technology that they just purchased is already paying off. If that customer is accelerating through that onboarding process, let that executive sponsor know. Especially with low touch, you don't have to wait 90 days to do the QBR with the customer. Have some automation set up to instantly or automatically email the executive sponsors to let them know how great the account's already doing. And the last thing about it too is it's a great time to ask for upsells as well. With Slack as the example again, right? If that user or if that team sends 2,000 messages, it's a great time to ask, hey, is there another department in your organization that could benefit from Slack? But at the same time, data is important here because if we already have 100% penetration rate at that customer account, it doesn't make sense for us to ask to be introduced to a different department. But maybe if we only have 10% penetration rate, obviously it would make a whole lot of sense to ask after they hit their aha moment. All right, and so in terms of the takeaways today, I hope everybody found it useful, but kind of the three big things that I'm hoping people walked away with is just getting a better understanding of how to use data to empower your customers to be more self-sufficient, get your customers not to the activation moment, but more to the aha moment, and keep the excitement high throughout the process, keep the momentum going. And my tip here, I feel like it's the same tip that I generally give for all of these impact webinars, but it's start small. Don't try to improve the whole onboarding process on day one. Instead, look at little things that you can improve. Always start with that welcome email. Just like Untapped, that welcome email made drastic improvements to their overall onboarding process. And then from there, look at, okay, what do we need our customers to be doing on day two? What do we need our customers to be doing a week in, 30 days in, and slowly grow and grow from there. But that welcome email can really yield a lot of positive results for your onboarding process. All right. And so want to save some time here for some questions and answers. Looks like we got some questions in here. Let me see if there's any that I can answer here. And like I said, any ones that we don't get answered, we'll follow up after the call. So you talked a lot about getting customer data. What if we don't have access to this data? Well, if you don't have access to customer data, use ChurnZero. ChurnZero will give you access to that data. But I mean, all kidding aside, right? If you don't have access to the data, analyze your support tickets. Look at your support tickets. Understand what are the common support tickets, and once again, speaking to your customers too, right? Speak to customers that just went through onboarding. Survey them afterwards. You'll get a lot of good information from them. Look at the ones that didn't make it through the process too. It's going to be incredibly useful as well. But if the question was more along the lines of, how do we get our team to want access to this kind of usage data? It's building the case for this type of technology. And kind of my recommendation there would be, when it comes to low touch segment, really understand that customer base, because if 50% of your customers make up your low touch segment, it's going to make getting this approved a lot easier versus if only maybe 5% of your low touch segment, 5% of your customer base is a low touch segment. The justification is going to be a little bit more challenging. But maybe even take it a step further, right? Understand the churn rate for those customers as well. If you have a high churn rate in the low touch segment, it's going to get, this a lot higher on the list of priorities versus if you have maybe no churn at all, right? It's going to be a little bit lower and more difficult to get that approved internally. All right, maybe one more here. I think we're over time, but other than revenue, how do you see companies defining their low touch segment? This is actually a good question. I was actually thinking about using something like this as one of the poll questions. But in terms of how companies define their low touch segment, obviously revenue is the big one there, but something else that we could look at too, revenue aside, is kind of the penetration rate, right? Total addressable market for those new customers. If it's a new small company or a customer that signs up with you that has one license and they'll only ever have one license, keep them in the low touch segment. But if it's a big organization that has a lot of growth opportunity or low penetration rate there, maybe look at putting them in a different type of workflow where we can start to grow and build out that account. All right, so last thing before everybody goes here, just want to promote my colleague. He has a webinar of his own coming up on March 23rd, so hopefully everybody can attend that as well. His name is Spiro Theodore. He's going to be leading the conversation on customer success everywhere. And so this stuff obviously has a large ripple effect across the whole organization. It's not just beneficial for customer success, but for everybody else in an organization. So his topic is going to be all about sharing this data with as many other teams as possible. But that is all I got for everybody today. I definitely appreciate you taking your time to join us for the call. We'll get the recording out to everybody. We'll follow up. There's some other questions here with answers to those questions. But I truly appreciate the time, and I hope everybody found value here. Thank you so much.